Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is Allen Bonnell, and we're going to talk about crisis leadership, how to shepherd a church through hard seasons. Allen, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate your ministry and partnership in the gospel.
I love Allen Bonnell and his ministry at Emmanuel Baptist, but let me tell you about who he is. Allen Bonnell is the lead pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church in Corbin, Kentucky. They have two other campuses, one in Williamsburg and one on the campus at EKU in Richmond. Allen came to faith as a teenager through the bus ministry of 9th and O Baptist Church when Laverne Butler was there as pastor, and was later discipled through InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, where he developed a heart for reaching college students that continues to show up in his ministry leadership today. He also served with InterVarsity in ministry. Allen and his wife Robin have two children, Rachel and Noah, and share a passion for missions and investing in others. Allen, tell us how you came. You've been at Emmanuel 18 years as pastor. Congratulations on long tenure. How did you come there as pastor? How did it happen that God opened that door for you? And how did you know that God was leading you there?
Yeah, we were at a church in Virginia, and ministry was growing well. We loved where we were at. We were 30 minutes from my in-laws, and we got a call one day, and someone asked if we'd be interested in talking to a church in Corbin, Kentucky. And I had to look up on a map where Corbin was. Even though I was from Kentucky, I didn't know exactly where it was. It's easy to confuse London and Corbin as you're driving down I-75 south. And we just began to seek the Lord. And after a season of prayer and meeting with the pastor search team here, we felt like this is where God was calling us. He spoke clearly to us and honestly through a lot of tears of God, are you sure? Because we loved where we were at, but we just heard God's clear voice and calling us here to Emmanuel. And man, it's been a sweet ride. God is so faithful. We came to a church that was hurting, but there was a remnant of faithful saints that were people of prayer and that were longing to see God move. And man, we just joined them in that prayer, and we've seen God move in incredible ways.
Numbers do not tell the whole story, but they do tell a story. And so there were about 200 people, it looks like, when you came to Emmanuel Corbin. Now there are about 1,200 on that campus. And then you have a campus in Williamsburg, which has about 350, probably mostly college students from University of Cumberland. You have a campus at EKU with about 150 folks in attendance, which is just really exciting. I want to go back, though, to your calling. Sometimes I wonder, and this is not a criticism of anybody's approach to understanding God's leadership on their life. Sometimes I feel like that calling might feel more like an HR kind of an idea that I like this church, I like this location, I'm interested in this. But I'm hearing you describe what really felt like a clear direction from God. Yeah. So I think I want to ask, how important was that when you got to Corbin and started the ministry, and there were difficulties, no doubt, in every church? How important was it that you knew that you heard from God, that you were where you were supposed to be?
That is a fantastic question, and I hope I can give a good answer, because it was definitely God's calling that kept us here. We as we were praying, we did what Richard Baxter said: make every major decision from the graveyard. Wow. So I went to Phipps Cemetery in Clintwood, Virginia, and I sat on one of those stone benches, and I wept before the Lord and told the Lord we didn't want to go, and said no, and God just kept reassuring us that He was in it. It was funny looking back, but there were folks on the pastor search team that didn't want us to come, began campaigning again.
Oh my goodness.
I guess it's my first crisis. The first crisis, this is perfect segue. The first crisis, it wasn't a unanimous vote, and I had another pastor search committee member call and say I wouldn't bring my young kids into this. And they had gone through just some travesty. They'd had a pastor who had an affair, got the girl pregnant, and then paid for her abortion. Wow. It was just very sad, just a crisis of leadership at the pastoral level. And so they were apprehensive. The budget really couldn't afford a pastor. Yep. And so that's why they were apprehensive about calling any pastor. It was because they even afford us. And I told them I did something very naive. And so in my ignorance and naivety, I said, it's got to be a high percentage. And so they voted. And again, there was a lot of turmoil going back and forth, and a lot of districts should even call, and if they should even call somebody. The church was struggling with what bills to pay.
Well,
Each month they had to decide what they were going to pay, what they weren't going to pay. And I said it had to be a high percentage. So when they voted and they called me and told me they voted me in, I asked the question, well, what was the percentage? And they said 82%.
yeah.
82%.
Wow.
And if it wasn't above 80, they couldn't have called me.
Yeah.
They could, according to their constitution. And I told them I had to go back and pray. And so I went back to that same cemetery and I prayed. I said, Lord, this church is, split up and chewed out pastors. Only one pastor told me to go. Dr. Laverne Butler was the only pastor that told me I should go. Every other pastor said, don't do it. I wouldn't take my family in that situation. I went back to that same cemetery and I said, God, I don't think this is it. And I had a guy schedule me right across from me. And he said, I wasn't a high percentage. You weren't coming. And again, campaigns me. They're trying to get votes, to people to get votes. And I just looked him in the eye. I said, I was wrong. I was arrogant. And that was of the flesh and not of the Lord. And I told him we had to come to a conclusion that if God was the only vote and he said go, then we were coming and we were going to trust him. Well, it didn't really satisfy the guy. He eventually left the church.
Yeah.
But God just began to bless us from the very beginning.
Wow.
We started seeing individuals come to know Christ, and God was faithful through all that. So it was a lesson I had to learn in the midst of that.
Yeah, Allen, we're having a real struggle with the connection a little bit. We're missing a lot of what you're saying, but we're going to go ahead and do the best we can. If Frank tells me otherwise, we'll do something different. But we'll press on. Man, I just want folks to hear your content. You mentioned Laverne Butler was the guy that told you to go for it, figure out if God's in it. He would have also been the guy that would have said your ministry to a place is only as good as your calling to that place. There are times, and we're going to talk about crisis, that the only thing that keeps you there is that I know God called me here, and He's not called me somewhere else. And otherwise, you go to the next job. You treat it like a job, and you'd go to the next one.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about crisis leadership, and so in every ministry, crises happen. They're unexpected. We're not prepared for them. They blow up your calendar because you've got a plan, and then crisis shows up, and you have to drop everything to deal with it. So can you give a couple of examples of crises that you've had to deal with, or as many as you want to, in your time as a pastor, whether it's at Corbin or somewhere else, or even in different ministry leadership? What are some things that have come up?
Yeah, when you ask this question, I spent some time just thinking through all the crisis that we've been through. And I'll be honest with you, it was a little depressing. I was like, man, I didn't realize we'd gone through all this.
Yeah.
I really think we're either, coming out of a crisis, we're in a crisis, or we're about to go in one.
Yeah.
That we live in a fallen, broken world, and we're messed up people in the midst of a messed up world. And hurt people hurt people.
Right.
And so Eden has not yet been restored. And so, man, the list of written down from natural disasters, from tornadoes to floods in our areas, people losing homes, crises that involved affairs in the church that just saddens you, living in different homes, and just the hurt and the brokenness of marriage to staff. Dr. Butler would say that your biggest problems in ministry are, and that's proven to be the case. Some of the most hurtful experiences and the most difficult crisis have been with staff.
Yeah.
It's because their family, they uproot, they move there.
Yep.
People love them. They've sacrificed so much. And also it's, as staff, we're the tip of the spear. So the enemies that attack staff at the root of his strategy is attacking the home, attacking the husband, attacking the leaders in the church, especially your pastors. And so a lot of these crises have come through staff as well. But the list was longer than I wanted it to be. But at the same time, I can look at all of those and see how God was faithful through those and how God shaped me. That I think one of the questions we need to ask when we're going through a difficult time is, why is this happening?
Yeah.
But what is God trying to teach me?
Right. Yeah, so Allen, Jeff Orge has said that leadership is for sanctification. and that we think about leadership as for productivity, leadership is for getting the mission accomplished, and there's that element to it. That's our perspective, but God's doing something through the leader as well as in the leader. Have you found that to be true, even
Yeah.
leading through crises?
It is. 12 times in First Peter, Peter talks about the sufferings of Christ.
Yeah.
And he is writing to an audience that's going through sufferings and trials. And we begin to identify with the sufferings of Christ that is through really that pressure that we're formed and we're shaped.
Yep.
And just like diamonds are shaped over a long period of time with a lot of pressure, so we're shaped. God uses them. God doesn't bring these sinful, horrendous tragedies and the sin of individuals to bear on our lives or life of our church, but he does use them.
Yeah.
He uses them, and he identifies with us in our suffering. We identify with Christ in our suffering, and he uses that suffering to shape us. Where otherwise, man, if we just continued on kind of a cruise control path,
Yep.
we really wouldn't grow. We wouldn't be stretched.
Yeah, man, I'm looking for the easy button, Alan, in everything that I do, and it's just, but God, God doesn't grow us through easy. I have a friend that went through a horrible situation at church, and I remember him saying that he said, this has made me pray more than anything else I've been through, and he said anything that makes you pray is ultimately a good thing, and a crisis will cause us to be dependent on God, and otherwise we may hit cruise control and just kind of go along like you're saying.
Yeah, man, that is so true. It's we're all looking for easy street, but we make the same mistake with our own kids.
Yep.
If we make it too easy on our own kids, they don't learn how to handle the problems of life, and then when they're outside of our care and our protection, they don't know what happens, and so much anxiety. So it really is through that process of God parenting us that prepares us for the storms of life.
When you look at every leader that God has used, if you read biography, at all, you'll find all of them had horrible experiences. I mean, David Brainerd's Diaries is a book that's on my mind right now. He had a horrible experience as a missionary in our country, pioneer early days, ministering to Indian tribes, and horrible experiences. And yet God just used him and even shaped him through those things. Alan, I'm wondering, so you've shared some categories of crisis that could happen. A church could go through immorality in the church, or even immorality among a staff. That could happen. A storm that came through, natural disaster. We could just list them on and on. When you've been through a crisis, who is someone maybe from the outside that was especially helpful to you? And did you turn to outside help when you've had crisis experience?
Yeah. I did, and really, the first place I turned was the Kentucky Baptist Convention, and to you, to Rob Patterson, Harold Best, some of those folks that I knew that they knew more than I knew, and they also knew more people than I knew.
Yeah.
And so once I reached out, the name was given to me, Tony Rose.
Yep.
He just happened to live here in Kentucky.
Yeah.
He was a pastor, trained and gifted, really, and crisis counseling. And he just experienced more than I'd experienced. He knew more than I knew. And he was an outside voice and a fresh perspective on what we were going through. And, and at that time it was a suicide within our church. And I knew that we needed help. We wanted to do this right.
Yep.
We wanted to care for people well. And if you want to care for people well, you know that it's not about you. There's no ego involved. It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay not to have all the answers, because we don't. It's just honesty.
Yeah.
And that's what we need during moments of crisis. Is we need clarity and we need honesty in those moments. And Tony was so helpful. He came in. He brought resources.
Yep.
He was able to preach on a Sunday morning for me. He was able to do some counseling with our staff. Like, you're not the only one going through this. I wasn't the only one going through the situation. And I needed help caring for the body and caring for my team. He met with families in the church for counseling. And we've used other counselors as well throughout the state, throughout our region. We've provided financial assistance to receive this counseling. whatever we could do to really love and shepherd people well through this time, we were willing to do.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'm assuming you had internal support. Your staff agreed that you needed that. Sometimes a guy may not have that support. You know, he's like, hey, we just need to, he may be hearing voices even in the church that will say, we just need to get on past this and move on. What was it, that, Alan, that helped you say we need to walk through this at a pace that recognizes people are going to be hurting, they're confused, they're going to have lots of questions? How did people in the church help you think through that, or did God just kind of lay it on your heart that we're going to be very intentional how we walk through this in order to handle it the right way?
Yeah. Wise is he who has a multiple of counselors.
Yeah.
We need many counselors in our life. So it was, whenever these events happen, a circle's small, but that circle gets bigger with communications. And so that the bigger the problem, the more people need to know. The more that the number of people need to know about the issue.
Yeah, makes sense.
And the bigger the pain, the longer it's going to take to go through it. And so to communicate with those inside the church, or even, you might be in a church and you're the only person on staff. You might be a church, you don't even have deacons at this point. Man, there are local pastors, there are individuals in your area, people that have just lived life.
Yeah.
And they love Jesus.
Yep.
And to call them, to reach out to them, God will speak through them. He will use them in a way that you could ever imagine, because we don't know what other people have gone through in their life.
Yep.
You're going to have a seasoned pastor out there who might not have a huge congregation, but they have a huge heart. Mm-hmm. And they've experienced loss, they've experienced brokenness.
Yep.
And they will pray for you, and they will journey with you, and they will have words of wisdom by the Spirit of God that lives in them to give to you.
Yeah.
And I say, listen to everyone. Every person that loves Jesus.
Yep. And make your decision. That's what you'll do.
Person,
just like you did on your calling, you listened to everyone, but you made a decision that you believe God was leading you to make. And the same thing through this sort of thing. And Alan, I would say to the folks who are not in the crisis, but know the crisis is happening with you or with somebody else, we have a responsibility there as well to reach out to that leader, and don't wait for him to call. Man, he's struggling. Text, phone call, voicemail, something. Just say, man, I'm praying for you. I don't need anything, but if I can help you, just know I'm for you, and be glad to walk with you through this. People just sometimes you just need to know that folks are for you and with you when you're struggling like that.
And to know you're not alone.
Yep.
You're not alone, that you do have access to people that are there with you in this journey, because, the evil one will use these situations and he'll make you feel like everybody's talking about you, or you're all alone in the situation. You got to carry the weight by yourself, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah. Alan, one of the things I'm thinking about, I'm sorry.
We need one another in that wilderness.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're having some cutting out issues. So one of the things that I'm thinking about, Alan, is that when I'm thinking about a case where there's been immorality in a church, key leader, maybe a staff person, maybe the pastor, and this is not your situation, but I'm familiar with it too many times. That people are on different ends of the spectrum when that has happened. There are some people who they were aware that the pastor fell morally, or the staff person. They've known about it for a little bit longer. They helped communicate to the church. They're ready to move on. They want to let's move on. But there are others who are just hearing this news, and man, they're confused and they're grieving, and they're not ready to move on. They're in a different place. How do you, as a leader, help a church family, because that's what it is? How do you help people who are on different ends of that grief spectrum, or confusion or anger spectrum? How do you kind of help them just kind of navigate at a pace that honors everybody and yet keeps the ministry moving forward?
Well, you have to keep people at the forefront.
Yeah.
Like in situations of crisis, you can't worry so much about your reputation personally, nor the reputation of the church. I think we're called to care for people. And God will not only care for his people, but he will protect the church.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can get wrapped up in how is this going to hurt my church? How is this going to hurt
Yep.
numbers? How might this hurt budget? How might this? But we have to realize we're dealing with people, souls of individuals that are going to be affected for the rest of their lives, and that we're going to put them first. And when you're the tip of the spear, you're gonna have heat put on you that no one else does.
Yep.
And so God will give you the grace and the mercy to withstand that heat. It's that sometimes you got to deflect. You're that heat deflector,
Yep.
and you're deflecting that for people in your and under your leadership that you're shepherding, that you need to guard and protect. And for some people that you're just going to have to stand in the way and kind of take some of those hits from individuals and go at a pace that honors the Lord and protects herding sheep.
Yeah, it's good. Alan, one of the things that it has to be thought through when a crisis happens in a church is communication. What can you communicate? And you can never communicate everything. There's oftentimes information that's just so sensitive it can't be shared. What helped you through some of these crises to know how to communicate to the congregation, what to communicate? I mean, you didn't have a class on that in seminary, right? On crisis communication. So how'd you process that part of it? And looking back, in any case you want to think about, what did you get right and what do you wish you would have done different?
As far as like communicating, really, I mean, it has to begin with prayer. You have to work both expediently whenever things are public and there's a widespread understanding and knowledge of what's going on. There has to be some expedience to what you're doing. So it's calling people in late night or early morning, getting the right people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And you should expand your circle of communication as more information comes together, and you need to tell the church body so more people know the details of it and they can handle these hallway conversations.
Yep.
Or communication out in the community. And then it's just be prayerful. What's going to be communicated? Asking the Lord to lead you in those times of what needs to be said and what shouldn't be said. And at the end of the day, in communication, the most important thing is integrity and honesty in communication.
Yeah.
And being open and vulnerable about the situation. That if something is uncovered later,
Yep.
then anything that you might have said before that was truth, that was very helpful, it's almost like nothing you said mattered if one thing comes out later and you were kind of shading it one way or the other.
Yep.
That what we need is honesty, not cover up.
Here's what we know.
And
Yeah.
so just
Here's what we know at this point. Here's how much we can share at this point. You have to say something, right? You can't so for instance, let's just say a person in the church gets arrested for sexual abuse, and that's going to be public news before it's church news. That's already out on Facebook and social media. And so you've got maybe an hour to figure out your communication strategy on that. And man, that's going to get some help and get your plan. And you're limited in what you can say, but you have to say something, because when we fail to communicate, people are left to develop their own story. Has that been your experience?
It is. And if you can get out and frame the narrative first and frame it properly, I'm not talking about spinning the situation one way or the other, but giving a proper frame to the communication of what's happening, that then the picture is going to be more clearly the people see. But if all of a sudden you wait and now you're having to answer questions that are out there and individuals that are communicating false truths or half truths out there, and you've got to address that. The water gets muddy. So I do think getting out in front of it is important.
Mm-hmm.
And communicating timely manner, but not over communicating.
Right.
Jesus said, "Don't throw your pearls before swine."
Yeah.
He tells us to be as shrewd as snakes, but as innocent as doves. Understand that we are dealing with a reputation. It's about honoring Christ and what we're doing, being real and honest in those situations.
So, Alan, I think maybe the last question is, okay, you're the leader and you're leading through crises or a crisis, and it may go on for a while. And day one, you have a lot of energy. Day two, you have a lot of adrenaline. Day three, you still do. But at some point, you just get really tired and you get fatigued and you start kind of living in this crisis, which is not healthy. And then it's going home with you. It's waking up with you every day. You really aren't giving yourself very well to your family because you're trying to process this big, massive problems. Other things are being neglected as well. How do you care for yourself, care for your priorities, which are your family and the church ministry? How have you tried to care well for yourself and those other priorities leading through a crisis?
It's a lot easier to stay out of a ditch than it is to get out of
Yeah,
one.
that's exactly right.
And so I think on the front end of it, man, it's practicing those spiritual disciplines
Yeah.
of in God's word, prayer, having leadership around you. Whether it's having multiple pastors, multiple elders, strong deacon ministry. Individuals in the church might not be a deacon or an elder, but man, they love Jesus.
Yep.
They're sound in terms of life and marriage. You're spending time with these people. So you don't want to come up to a crisis and then start to look around and say, who's with me?
Mm-hmm.
You should know who's with you before that crisis hits.
Yeah.
If not, then that was an issue. So I think it's preparing before it hits,
Mm-hmm.
and making sure that I'm doing my soul work, time with the Lord, and having the right community of people around me, and the right processes. So when it does hit, then those pain points are going to come. But people are asking, how are you doing? How are you really doing? And we're not carrying the burden alone.
Yep.
The Bible actually says to cast all of our cares upon the Lord.
Amen. Yeah.
So they're not casting them on us. They bring them to us, and we're just going with them to the Lord. So let's bring this to the Lord. Let's bring this burden to the Lord. And then I think as we look at the scriptures, it's just to carry one another's burdens. The thought there, there's a sense there of a group of people. It's a group that we're carrying. It's a picture of the four friends carrying their friend on the mat to Jesus. That there's a collective group of people. Like, don't carry these burdens alone in the midst of them, and bring other people in on the decision. If you make the decision, you got to carry the burden of the result. But if people make that wrong decision, or there's been a better decision, then you're not carrying the full weight of that by yourself.
Yeah. Well,
and that's kind of the key.
There's a lot of leadership gold in there. Allen, I appreciate you, and I appreciate your ministry. It's exciting to watch what God's doing at Emmanuel Corbin, but also through your ministry at Williamsburg and at EKU. And man, I know you guys are open to more work than that God's really put on your heart, reaching college students with the gospel and reaching other communities as well. We'll get you on again and talk about church multiplication and how the Lord's using Emmanuel Corbin there. But thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for joining Leadership Lessons. Thanks for listening to Leadership Lessons. An audio podcast of this program is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. The Kentucky Baptist Convention was created by churches for churches to help churches reach Kentucky and the world for Christ. For more information about the KBC and the cooperative program, which fuels our ministry, go to kybaptist.org. We'll see you next time on Leadership Lessons.